We're starting now. Thank you, Chair Huntsman, for pounding the pounder. One day I'll feel actually. Does it feel good? I'll give it a little tap. All right, there you go. Okay. We're going to go ahead and start. Board Member Booth.
Madam Chair, I would like us to, I would move that we return to agenda item 14.4, where we removed the term student-centered learning. I believe we didn't have a complete discussion and get all of the feelings out on the table that we need to, and we don't want to have negative repercussions for teachers and leaders who are confused by an action like removing student-centered learning. So,
okay, thank you. We need to do a couple of things then. We need to confirm that Board Member Booth was on the prevailing side of that vote.
Yes, he was.
Yes, he was. And then we need a second to bring that back.
Second. Oh, by prevailing.
You have to be on the prevailing side.
Second.
Okay, we have a second. Member Belknap, Vice Chair Belknap.
thank you.
Was she on the prevailing side? Yes, she was. Okay, those in favor to bring this back for further discussion, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That passes unanimously. So, Board Member Booth, do you want to speak to your motion, or do we have questions for others?
I would like those who felt that they were not able to express themselves clearly in the meeting to take the opportunity to express themselves.
Okay, thank you. I just want to be clear about where this comes, and it's
14.
Get it on the screen. You bring it up. Yeah, just put it up on the screen.
so it's in the effective teaching standards, standard 4, at the bottom of school climate, and we had voted, for those listening online, to delete the word centered from student-centered. And this now has been brought back to the floor for discussion. So, Member Earl.
Yes, and I'll just speak to this. When you look at Standard 4,
Could we,
get back down.
point of order? Oh, it looks like we're bringing it up to the screen. Thanks.
Yeah. Talking about classroom climate, effective teachers create academic, physical, social, and emotional conditions to support student environments. If do you want that, or do you want the finished product? Do you want the drafts? Running it. The whole document and good educational practice does focus on students. But student-centered learning ends up becoming one type of methodology or belief, and it should be expanded so that there's all different ways of looking at education. And we know that education swings from one type of methodology to another. And I just think it doesn't take away from those that are doing student-centered learning, which is a philosophical belief system in education, and many are using that. There's others out there. But when you look at the whole standards and you go through these standards, their focus is on meeting those individual needs. And so removing this allows for that broadness instead of a more narrowed approach, especially when we're talking about our effective teacher standards. Anyways, that's my thoughts on this, and I think that it doesn't take away from the work that's being done in different areas. I think it still allows that to take place. Like I said, if you read through the rest of the standards, it still gives those very pieces that allow to focus on students and their work. So I just wouldn't want to narrow it so much that we're not allowed to meet many different methodologies and philosophical views.
Chair Hansen?
I just request that we hear from staff about the definition of student-centered and its use in other USB materials, and any possible reaction, I guess, from the field at the removal of student-centered, if they could anticipate that.
Deputy Norman?
Yes, thank you. First of all, Deputy Norman, student achievement, I just wanted to thank you for bringing this back. Things are happening super quick, and staff is trying as hard as they can to even type what the amendments are. So thank you for bringing this back and taking a minute to address it. So in looking at this, there just needed to be, I think, a clear discussion so that when we do the rest of the work as your staff to the board, as you make these decisions, we're clear on the intent of the board. And this is looked at as a foundational document and a belief system from the board when you say what it is that you approve and don't approve, and the things that you find and believe are tenets that are central to achieving your strategic goals and mission. So in looking at this on Standard 4, and this is the printed copy that looks like this right here, it goes with the classroom climate. And right under there it says effective teachers create academic, physical, social, and emotional conditions to support student-centered environments by, and then it has the 4 elements underneath it. In removing student-centered, then that removes it from the document. That's the only place it's found, except for also in the glossary, which then says this is the definition of student-centered. The definition of student-centered is referring to instructional methods that recognize students as active participants in learning by attending to their interests and abilities while providing opportunities for them to access, represent, and demonstrate their learning. So if it's taken out of the one place, it's also taken out of the glossary, because we all know that you don't write a paper and put in the glossary what's not in the text. And so then it's taken out, so there is no reference to student-centered learning, which then becomes foundational pieces for PCBL. So staff just wanted that clarification that in taking it out of this document, it's not being requested to take it out of other documents, and that it is still a foundational concept as we move forward in doing the work of the board.
I'd follow up briefly.
Okay. Chair Hansen?
Okay. Could we just hear briefly about the process that this standard has been through with committee and public input before it got to this point?
Hello, Katie Dewey-Hill, Quality Instruction Coordinator, and I worked with my colleague Cammie Dupre to organize a design team comprised of educators, and you can see in the document that's part of the backup documents, that's the draft that Dr. Norman was reading from, has a list of all of the people who participated on those design teams. And they all peer-reviewed each other's standards, and they are comprised of educators, administrators, PTA representation. We had higher ed folks on there as well. So all of the parts of the system that we work with were represented in those design teams, and going through and teasing out and arguing over the different elements and what should be there and what shouldn't, and how could this be interpreted by a school in this setting versus a school in this setting. And so it went through all of that review within the team, and then was released for public comment for the requisite, is it 60 days? 60 days. The required amount of time to go to the public. So America got to weigh in on what the standards were and what they thought about them. And we took all of those comments and synthesized anything that was actionable that we could implement into the standards that would help maintain the spirit of fostering what Dr. Norman was talking about with the foundational document that this is, and what we could implement, and then also shared that with, once we took all of that feedback and made some changes based on that feedback, we shared it with another group of educators from various parts of the field of what they thought, and then made some changes, and we shared it with the members of the board, who then weighed in and shared what their thinking was, and that's why you see those three columns there. So these have been seen by many eyes from many different perspectives, and it was a real honor to be part of that process, because we learned a lot about what the priorities are in the field and what the priorities are. Education isn't just educators, it's basically everyone, right? And just seeing how this would impact everybody's work, we knew how critical it was that all those voices be part of that process.
Thank you. Member Straight?
I so appreciate the context, and it's a good reminder. I mean, we all know of the processes that these things go through. And as an educator, student-centered learning, being student-centered is really one of our main objectives, if not the objective. So thank you for the context, and I appreciate the opportunity to revisit this.
Board Member Booth?
I just want to speak to the incredible value of listening as a board to the staff members who have spent even more hours than we spent poring over our board book to get ready for this meeting, and the other hours that we've spent in committees and in discussions and personal study. I am really grateful that we can bring the ideas and the perspectives of people who are not in the classroom and who maybe have a lifetime of experience in the big picture. But it certainly is reassuring to hear these comments and to know that there is very careful attention being given to hearing the voices that are going to eventually lead us to what's best for our kids in the classroom. And I'm very appreciative of these comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Hart. And I just want to say that the motion that we made to bring it back technically is a motion to reconsider rather than bring back to the table. So I said it poorly, but we are reconsidering now. Thank you. Thank you.
My concern is that I'm wondering what are the other types of learning of student learning besides student-centered learning? And I want to make sure that we're not using jargon, because we have a tendency to do that in education. And I think our standards need to stay somewhat timeless. In looking at these, I pulled out the last two versions, and I can see how we keep adding and we keep adding. And at some point, that's what alienates the people that are trying to understand what we're doing. And unless it adds significant meaning, I don't understand why we continue to use language that isn't easily understood. So I think it's important that we remember what we're trying to do in education. This isn't an encyclopedia. This is not a lesson. This is not a syllabus for a teaching class, a pedagogy class. This is a compass of sorts. And by adding that centered, by changing it from student learning to student-centered learning, I'm not sure that the value of that word outweighs the clarity of not having the word. So that's my feeling on the matter. Thanks.
Thank you, Vice Chair Belknap.
Yes, Chair, thank you. I'd like to make a motion that we go back to I'm not sure exactly how to make this, that we go back to the original motion coming out of committee to put back in the word centered.
So you are moving to go back to the amendment that was made to replace the word centered.
Yes.
Yes, but she wants to now replace the word centered. So you are moving to replace the word centered in Standard 4, bottom of school climate. correct?
If we're reconsidering.
Yes, to put it back in.
Then you just vote again on the motion. We're reconsidering the amendment. So all we need to do is vote. We don't need a different.
We need to vote on removing it again?
No, we just need to reconsider the motion that was made. The same
Yes,
motion and reconsider. You don't want another motion,
Right.
correct?
Okay. Okay, so
So
you're calling the question, Vice Chair Belknap, to reconsider the effective educator standards. The board shall amend standard 4 classroom climate by striking the word centered. So if we vote yes for this, the word centered will continue to be stricken. And if we vote no, the word centered will be replaced, correct? It will remain or reinstated. Are you okay with that, Board Member Belknap?
Yes, I am.
oh, too soon, too soon.
Okay. We have a motion on the floor that for the effective educator standards, the board amend standard 4 classroom climate by striking the word centered. Those in favor say aye. Wait, I'm taking a roll call vote on this. That was requested, so. Yes. Vice Chair Belknap?
Remind me, I'm sorry.
Yes, strikes out centered. No replaces
No.
centered.
No,
Board Member Booth? No. Member Cannon? No. Member Klein? Yes. Member Earl? Yes. Member Hanson? No. Member Hart? Yes. Member Chair Huntsman? No. Member Hutchings? Yes. Member Hymas? Yes. Member Lear?
No.
Member Moss? Yes. Member Norton? No. Member Straight? No. Okay. And I am a no because I think theoretically they mean the exact same thing. So let's move on to the next one. Chair Hanson.
Yes. Back to the second session of standards and assessment. We're on item 15.2. The committee recommends.
Wait, sorry.
Sorry. We still have to vote on the motion. Yeah. Yeah.
It's not amended. Now do we have to
Yeah, but
vote
we
on the
haven't
whole
passed
thing
it.
as
Yeah.
not amended?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Back to the original motion.
Okay. Both amendments did not pass, correct? But we still have to go back and vote on the original motion. We have a motion on the table that the board approves the revision to the Utah Effective Teaching Standards. Do we need to have someone make that motion again, or can I just repeat?
That was the motion from committee.
Okay, we have a motion that the board approves the revision to the Utah Effective Teaching Standards, Draft 3, for final approval. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? No. Well, we only have two, Member Klein and Member Earl. Chair Hanson. Thank you for that. We do want to do it right. Thank you.
Back again to item 15.2. The motion for the board is that the committee recommends the board approve 3 Strands Global Foundation Protect Utah student instructional materials for final approval.
We have a motion on the board that we have a motion on the floor that the board approves 3 Strands Global Foundation Project. I'm going to start over. We have a motion that the board approves 3 Strands Global Foundation Project Utah student instructional materials for final approval. Board Member Earl.
Yes, I have a motion.
An amendment?
Yes, I'm sorry, an amendment to that motion. And I don't know if anyone has that or not, but sorry, my motion is that we ask Three Strands Global Foundation to address a number of issues over the next 30 days and bring it back to us in the September board meeting.
As outlined in
And you want me to actually go over
backup
the,
or,
what's that?
well, just where is it written? Is it in public? Is it in civic clerk?
I don't think so. Yes, my amendments.
Can you do a quick summary of
yes,
what
I
you
will.
would be asking
Number
Three
one,
Strands to
that-
consider?
Yep. Number one, adopt age-appropriate instruction for page 53. It's not addressed in the lesson plan. Do you want me to explain that? So age-appropriate instruction for page 53, if I'm going to simplify it. And number two would be address parents within the curriculum. Number three, on slide 10, it states that there isn't anyone that is safe by nature. We need to address that. This is a false statement, should be removed. They want to clarify with some kind of other comment there. Number four would be clarify language so youth understand that personal stories of abuse should not be publicly disclosed in a classroom setting. Number five, remove the consent language framework and apply clear refusal skills that align with 53G 10402. Number six, address the two rights referenced in law, informing a student of the student's right to report and seek counseling for unwanted sexual advances are the two rights referenced in law. And then change other rights to I can statements. Number seven, you shouldn't be asked to keep information discussed in classroom private, so there's a concern over, all right, I'll be specific, slide 12 and 27. And on slide 11, they're asked to keep information secret, or they don't use the word secret, not shared outside the classroom. I think needs to be revised. Number 8, remove strangers and friends you meet gaming as potential safe people on page 72 and 73. Number 9, parent notification can assist in avoiding situations where a child is triggered by past experiences. Just making sure those are in their form. Number 10, remove right to fill. And I don't know if I need to explain that. No kids have nobody has a right to feel something. We have other rights, but feelings cannot be. So those are my 10 recommendations.
Thank you. Chair Hansen?
Yeah, I've got
I'm sorry, was
question
that
for
Oh.
staff.
I wondered if we could hear from
Oh, I
staff.
think you said Huntsman, sorry.
If we could just hear.
Sorry, I said Hansen, but
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
I know,
Yeah.
you're fine, I'll wait, sorry.
I think it'd be valuable for us to get just some background information from staff, and then I would also like to speak to the different amendments as well.
okay, Member Hymas. Second.
Could we ask, let's see, there she is. Deputy Norman to speak to us for a minute.
Thank you, Deputy Superintendent Patty Norman, Deputy Student Achievement. There was a lot of questions in committee and then during our second special meeting, and those questions are briefly answered in a slide deck. And so, because the questions were so diverse, this slide deck is a compilation of the questions that were asked. So this isn't about bias of staff. We're trying to insert information, but it really was the questions from different board members that were asked over and over to get a clear picture of what the role of the board is. So let me present this. First of all, no, this is just me taking some notes. It's just, and I will send it out to all of you. First, this is what the rule states. The rule is that the state board shall approve. They shall approve two different things in conjunction with the Department of Human Services. So we are a partner with the Department of Human Services, and the state board shall approve training and instruction for school personnel and for parents of elementary children. So they shall approve two different things and then be able to offer that training twice or once every 2 years. Then it says that these materials that are approved, then you as a board, you place them on a website, and then with this, a school may choose to also have curriculum for students. So the shall is instruction to parents and educators. The may is schools may provide curriculum, but if a school chooses to have curriculum for sex abuse or human trafficking, then the state board shall have an approved list of that curriculum. So although it's a schools may, your job is to have a list for them to choose from if they choose to do that. So with that in mind, this is the notice of parents, because this is a question that comes up a lot. Parents have to be notified. Then they also have a different guidelines or ways for them to be able to participate. One is notified in advance. Two, they can be in the classroom during the presentation, so they can be present at that time. They also have the opportunity to review beforehand any of the curriculum that is set before them that will be taught in the classroom. So they can excuse their child, they can be present, and they can also review the curriculum. Those are the things that this gives their parents the right to do. Then the other part of this statute is that the school shall provide evidence of compliance. So with those things, the state board, meaning all of you, and then we as staff have provided that website, and this is the website that we have. And then on that, this is the list of approved curriculum that you as a board have approved in the past. If you look at that 3 strands curriculum, and this is an important piece, has already been approved by you as a board for adults serving youth and also for the parents and guardians. If you look again, there is nothing in the section for youth or for students. That means that the state board is out of compliance, because now we have schools who are asking for this. They've incorporated the may, and they're saying we need to, and they're saying where is it, and there's nothing for them to use. So then we've also been asked why are we doing this in the state of Utah? What are the national statistics and what are the statistics for the state of Utah itself? More than 4/5 of perpetrators are between the ages of 18 and 44. More than 1/2 are females, and 47.1% are males, and 77.2% of perpetrators are a parent to their victim. So those are the national statistics. So let's see and the other national statistics, well, how many students is this? 4.4 million referrals, which impacted 7.9 million children, so almost doubles. That means that there's more than one child involved in every one of the reporting in there. And then the second statistic is that we've also been asked, is this overreported, underreported? It actually stated in this, and I have all of this I can give to you afterwards, that and this was from the Department of Child and Human Service. Yeah, thank you. And there's a report that's also in here from 2020. So it estimates that only 1 in 10 children victims disclose the abuse. And so the numbers that you see immediately are low, and then they increase afterwards because as adults they have feel they have more of a voice. So within that, what does that look like in the state of Utah? In the state of Utah, there's over 40,000 reported cases of abuse. 20,000 of those were accepted for formal assessment. So it goes 40,000 to 20,000, and then about 10,654 of those are confirmed cases. Of those, how does that break down for specifically to sexual abuse of children? That's 14.3%. So in the state of Utah, that equals about 745 students per year that are being impacted by this. So those are the numbers that have been asked for by different board members. And then what does that look like? If you remember, the national statistic is 77% are parents, and then the Utah-specific statistics are 72%. This is in child and abuse neglect cases. This is not specific to sexual abuse. Going on, because this curriculum 3 strands actually does 2 things. It meets all of the standards and requirements that were set forth in the child sex abuse and human traffic curriculum. So this is the only curriculum that has been given or provided to the board to review that meets both of the requirements and actually could go in both areas for youth. There are 251 number of human trafficking victims served between 2019 and 2020 in the state of Utah. And Utah is the 4th highest state in the nation for human trafficking. So with that, here's what your role is during this in looking at this curriculum. So these are copyrighted materials. So if you do any discussion of the curriculum itself that was provided for you via a link in your backup documents, we can't show that curriculum because it is copyright protected. Parents can view it, but we can't show it because it's not something that we have purchased, and then it comes out there for everyone else. We violated copyright. So if you're going to be speaking to any of the things on there, just as Board Member Earl modeled so greatly, it's about the page number and perhaps a sentence or some wording choices that were within. If you also talk about this, we need to refer to it by the PDF or page number so that we can have, those of us that are around the table can have access to what it is that you're talking about. The next one is the board does not have authority to adjust any of the content or wording within it. This is a vendor product. This is not a product of the board, meaning that as a board, we are not wordsmithing, but instead you are either accepting or rejecting. If you have rejected this, then the board can make suggestions to provide to the vendor for consideration. If rejected, again, this goes back to the non-compliance. It will cause further delays. And then there's also the safeguard in here is if you as a board do accept this, then it does go on that vetted site for an LEA to then to be able to choose from. If an LEA chooses curriculum, then it does implement that process that's involved where they then have to go through their formal process of approving curriculum as an LEA. So you would be the first filtering process for approval of a curriculum, and then the LEA would still need to go through that process on their own. And I think that that would now come to the point of, there's other questions, but I will just have them, and hopefully that was pretty concise of a review as you begin your discussion.
So, having heard that, am I correct in understanding that your motion would need to ask the board to reject the curriculum and send it to the vendor to consider those 10 changes? Is that what your motion is?
That would be accurate.
Okay.
Yep.
We have a motion on the floor to reject the 3 strands curriculum and send these suggested changes to the vendor for consideration and for their response to be brought back to the board, correct? Discussion to the motion? We had a second, which was Member Hymas. Are you fine with that clarification of the motion?
Yeah, I would just like to hear some discussion. I know that Member Earl went through those kind of quick and stopped herself from that discussion, so I'd like to hear more on that if she's willing.
Okay. Let me go ahead and speak to your motion, Member Earl, and then we have several people who want to speak, so we'll ask everyone to be as concise as possible.
I'll try to be as quick as
Since we're
possible.
way
I just want to
behind.
be clear. We're not out of compliance. We haven't had anybody meet the requirements yet. There have been a number that have come forward and they have not met the requirements. So the idea that we're out of compliance is not an accurate statement. We haven't had anybody that's met those requirements yet. So let me just touch on a couple of these. Trying to be courteous, make sure we don't go too far or whatever. But number 1 was age-appropriate language. The curriculum, which has some great components to it, just because I've had recommendations here does not mean it doesn't have great components. It uses safe touch, uncomfortable, and safe circles. But the Utah language, which we maybe should be concerned about, uses language, because I know it's for all grade levels, but it doesn't say how it's going to address terms like non-sexual touch, sexual abusers, sexual nature, sexual material, strip games, sexualized games, or sexual behavior. I'm not sure how that's going to be addressed. I think that's important that those items are, that they're not referenced in the actual lesson plans, but they're referenced towards the end of the document. Page 53 is that information. Number 2, address parents in the curriculum. I understand that some children are abused by their parents, but there's a number of scenarios within the document where kids, like a gaming situation, and they had someone asking for additional information. The best person to go to would be their parents. So to completely strip it out and make it look non-neutral, neutral in that anybody, just get to somebody, I think we're missing the point. There may be scenarios in here where we do want to create a little bit more ambiguity because we do have kids that have been abused. That is understandable, but to strip parents throughout the whole document, it to me is concerning. On slide 10 where it says, isn't there anyone safe by there isn't anyone safe by nature. I really think we need to look at that terminology if we're using that language towards children. It gives kids, all children, the idea that there is no one that's safe out there. Consent language, I'm not even sure why this is a violation. Utah law is refusal skills. We do not have consent language. It's gone through we've had people bring it up. Carol Moss has brought it up a number of times. We did not approve that, but this language sits within this document. So I'm not sure how it passed the element of meets the state law. And they do have consent language in there. So they just need to look at the balance of that. Not consent language, I apologize. Refusal skills is addressed in there. But it's when you're putting both in there, it becomes confusing. And then I just think on students' rights, that if we're not careful, we get into rights that resemble things that come from the UN or other international organizations that it's going to give the appearance of students' rights versus parents' rights, or even other rights. So I just think we have to be very careful on how we use that we don't give this idea that students our children are separate from families. There may be situations, legal situations, when that happens, but that's a rare case. And once again, I think a way of phrasing that would be more in affirmative and assertive tones. I can protect, I can, versus defining them as rights. All right, let me look down here. As far as in the class discussion on slide 12 and 27, there is a suggestion not to share about the contents that are in the class. This is just my recommendation, is that it is changed to respect other students and what they're sharing, instead of encouraging kids not to share outside of class. It just gives when we're teaching about secrets, it gives the wrong impression there. And then along that same lines, at the end of the activity, or there's one of the activity that says we're just going to share between you and me. I think it could be worded so that kids could leave it there. They didn't feel like they had to take it home. For those that we have concerns with, that they may not have a safe environment at home. I just think there's a better way to word that. And then I don't understand why we have strangers on page 72 and 73 as possible potential safe people, as well as online gaming friends you meet gaming would be considered on those documents. And then let's see. And then I have a concern with this telling kids that they have a right to fill something. And I'll just read what I have here. However, children should be able to express. Sorry, let me read. No one has a defined right to fill something. However, children should be able to express their feelings to others. The first is an impossible goal for parents and educators to meet because they have no control over someone else's emotional state or how they feel. But a parent or educator or other community member can listen, connect, and help keep you safe. And that's the nuts and bolts of where I'm going with those. So,
Thank you. Member Lear?
ask other people for a minute.
Member Klein?
Okay, I just had a couple questions for Patty Norman. Do you have, on the things that you showed on the PowerPoint, do you have where you found all of those statistics included on there? Okay. Is this a tech-based curriculum or teacher taught?
Chair, may I answer?
Yes.
Hi, Tanya Albornoz, Coordinator for Prevention and Student Services. The curriculum is online for the teacher or the person who will be giving the instructional materials in the classroom. It's not given online to students. It's just there for the person who's providing that training to access online.
Okay, so it's not a dynamic curriculum.
Correct.
It can change, right? It would stay the way it is, however we adopt it. And it wouldn't be able to be changed without our approving any changes.
So we'll be considering a rule right after we're done considering this instructional materials that will clarify that. At this time, there is no rule in place that states that they have to come back for approval if they make changes to it. But if that rule is passed, then there will be something in place.
So we're accepting or being asked to approve a curriculum before we have a rule in place that details those specifics out?
So the staff that were in place when the statute was passed determined that they didn't need to put a rule in place because they felt like it would just be a regurgitation of the rule of the language in statute. So there was no rule put in place at that time. So currently that's correct. We don't have a rule.
But there is plans to make a rule.
Correct.
Okay. All right.
Deputy Superintendent Norman, and then we'll come back to finish up Board Member Klein's.
That is the next item on the agenda, R277-630, and that rule is created specifically with this in mind. And we have Jeff Van Holten who will be helping to present that. So that was made at the same time as reviewing all of these things, to your point, so that those things don't happen.
Okay. And I'll just end with my own thoughts on this. While I understand this is an incredibly important issue, a growing issue, I also believe it is not the role of the schools, regardless of laws that have been passed. That is my opinion.
Member Straight?
Oops, yes. So we have been tasked by the legislature with the requirement to adopt materials. We have this curriculum, the three strands, has been used widely. It's been applied widely throughout the United States. It has strong support from many individuals, including the Attorney General's office. I know everyone received that memo, and I don't take marching orders necessarily from any of those, except we do have a responsibility to put in place what the legislature requires of us. We have that duty. And I think the thing that really is the linchpin for me is we're just approving for LEAs to use this. LEAs will make the final determination. And LEAs can make requests for changes at their level because each of the LEAs have different needs. And I don't know that that'll occur, but it'll go through the processes for each LEA. And so I feel confident that not only in the curriculum itself and the need and the timeliness of it, but I also believe the processes are in place that no LEA is going to be required to use this curriculum.
Chair Hansen?
I don't mean to butt in line. I'd like to speak on it when it's my turn. So.
Okay. Board Member Moss. Oh, sorry. It's actually Lear is next. Sorry.
That's all right. I had to gather my thoughts. So thank you for coming back to me. First of all, I don't see anything that would prevent the board from passing this or approving this curriculum and then allowing Member Earl to take your concerns to 3 strands, because I actually agree with some of your clarifications, but I feel like this is an overall good curriculum that we should allow our LEAs to get started with. I don't want this to the enemy of perfect to be overlooked, and I'm not saying that right. I want us to accept something good, not wait for something perfect. And I also have a hard time processing all of these amendments without the context in which they occur. Because I just, for instance, I removed the consent language framework. Well, I don't think that consent language is incompatible with refusal skills. They can both be understood if necessary, and it depends on the age of the students too. So I don't think, unless you just accept wholesale all the connotations that go with both of those, which I don't think they have to be incompatible. So those are just my thoughts. I would prefer something that puts us in compliance with the law, that we move forward with curriculum that's approved and respected.
Member Moss.
Just following up on Member Straight's comment that an LEA might obtain, variations on this or customizing. Do we know anything about that happening? I have to say I'm sort of institutionally disturbed every time a provider says, well, I want your stamp on this or I want your payment, but you can't tell me to do anything about it to fit your needs. That's there's a natural pushback there, right? Because you'll have different concerns that you consider in one state or locality. And so it would be nice if we did have an opportunity to say, look, we love your stuff, but we've got some locally based concerns. Please fix them, and we're happy to approve you and put you on the list. That, in my view, is how this ought to work in pretty much any provider context. In here, I get that this is kind of a wholesale copyrighted material. We're also living in a digital age where stuff is flexible. So are we aware of any LEA or other, body that's kind of sought and obtained some flexibility from this?
Chair, may I answer?
Yes.
So Board Member Ross, thank you for that question. I can confirm, and I know that, for example, 3 Strands has worked with Granite School District very closely on this curriculum and received their feedback and approval from a number of groups, including their administration, school counselors, as well as parent groups who have looked at this and provided feedback, and they've made changes in it due to that feedback that was provided to them. So I can provide that has happened, yes.
Very quick follow-up.
Go ahead.
Is there a reason we can't do that at the state approval level as opposed to the local district implementation level if they've already sort of cracked that wall and made some tweaks?
Go ahead.
Yes. I think the difference between the two, if I'm understanding your question, so if I don't answer it, tell me that's not what you asked, is that we are not purchasing curriculum. We are not a part of an RFP process at all. All we're doing is we're reviewing something and having vetted it, and then you guys will say, or you as a board, will be able to say, yes, we've approved it. So once it enters into an RFP process and they have money exchanging and they're going through saying, this is what we have in an RFP and what we expect, then they have greater ability to then negotiate with that vendor to have those types of conversations. So I don't know if that exactly answers it, other than the fact that we take it as wholesale. Yes, that conversation can be had, and I do know that board members have reached out to 3 Strands, and there's already been some changes that were made prior to this, and then moving forward, I would think I can't make assumptions other than the facts that I know, and those are the facts that I know at this point.
Thank you. That does answer the question. There's a distinction between approval for a list and actually purchasing, but I still think we are a user and one with a lot of leverage if you're the gatekeeper to the purchaser, right? So that's where I question whether there's not an ability to push back and get a bit of.
Member Norton.
I think we've heard a lot of the same thoughts being discussed, and mentioned by many board members all in a row. I keep thinking, yep, that's what I'm thinking. That's what I'm thinking. That's what I'm thinking. And so I'm not going to say those same things again, but I am going to say that I do have, a strong conviction that the philosophy that we are telling children to not, talk about this, and they can change who, what, where, and when, but, we can't be telling kids to keep things like this a secret. I think that's a big part of this whole problem, is it's been a secret too long. From the child trafficking to the child sex abuse has been a secret, and that's what's got to end. Now, whether we frame that by saying, you can tell me, a school adult, or another trusted person, because I do know that sometimes it is a parent, but I think, I don't, and that's where, when I look at those statistics, that concerns me, but I do think majority of the time, a parent is the safest person they should be talking to, because parents that do their job are a child's greatest advocate. So that is concerning anytime we're telling a child to not talk about this. So that would be my comment.
Member Hutchings?
Great, thank you. I want to thank Member Earl for her hard work on this. She's really dug in, and she has found things that overall, we need this. We really need this. We need to help our kids be aware and to be safe. But we also, if we're going to be endorsing and listing this curriculum or this product, we need to feel like it is really protecting our kids in the right way, that we believe in Utah is the right way, and protects it with the parents, not opposing the parents, and go through. I think there's enough significant concerns that Member Earl has pointed out. We need to go back and negotiate. We do need to be in compliance also. It is important that we're in compliance, but this is the process by which we become compliant in a product that is going to benefit our kids. And these are significant enough issues that we do need to go back and ask them to make some modifications so we can feel really good about this very serious issue that we'll be addressing with children in the state of Utah to keep them safe.
Member Hart?
So when I reached out and spoke with Three Strands, they did indicate that there were some adjustments. And I have some verbiage. I know you said not to because of copyright, but I believe it's short enough. So I'd like to just enter this in as an example of the materials and some of the adjustments that they made. Quote, engage with students as you go over key takeaways from the lesson. Reflect and frame what they share as appropriate. Let students know who is available for support. Remind students about trusted adults who they can talk to about anything discussed in the class today, on or off campus. And that was an addition that they made. Emphasize to the class that what other students have shared during the lesson should not be shared with other students outside the class. And that was an addition they made as well, based on feedback that they got from board members prior to today's meeting, but after, it had moved forward. And then it continues, this is not intended to be a secret, but rather a way to avoid any potential gossip about personal things that students have shared. If there were any comments made about children being harmed, follow your mandated reporting procedure. So I just wanted to indicate, just so everybody's aware that there are some places where I think Three Strands has heard the message. I don't think they've been impervious to those pieces of feedback. What concerns me is the fact that there's nothing in that column. What also concerns me is a very large district in our state has worked with this company or this organization, and I'm wondering, my question after all that is, what would this do to what any district that has worked with them, does this have any implications for them? Does anyone know?
Is there someone that would like to take a shot at answering that? Please.
Patty Norman, I think that let me clarify your question. You're asking that if changes have already been made because a district currently is using 3 strands curriculum or has met with them?
Well, that was like part A. My part B is my question, and it is, if this does not get approved today, what happens with perhaps districts that they already are working with in our state?
That would be
Chair Hansen.
Oh, no, I'm fine. I'd just like to get in line here. I
Oh.
deferred for a couple, but I've been.
Okay. Go ahead. I don't know if you're Director Albornoz. I don't.
Coordinator.
Coordinator
Tanya Albornoz, I'm
Albornoz.
Coordinator for Prevention and Student Services. Essentially, what it would mean is that they would not be able to use this curriculum until it is approved by the board.
Chair Huntsman.
So this is a question for staff to help me understand exactly where we're at. I understand this is about compliance and that we have to put this out there, this or something else, or multiple, but it's a may and not a shall, correct? It's not a shall, they don't have to accept.
So there's a part to it. So the state board, so if a school may provide this curriculum, if they choose to provide this curriculum, the state board shall have the approved list. So the role of the state board is to have they shall have the approved list, but a school may choose to teach the curriculum. But if they do, it has to be on that approved list.
Okay, so what's interesting about this, that I heard you say this, so we approve this curriculum, but yet the LEA then works and purchases this, and they can negotiate away from that curriculum. That's what I think that's what I heard. So we could put next to nothing on here, and we're not going to get the water to the end of the row of what our expectations are on the curriculum. It's a starting place. This is what I'm hearing how the statute reads, but we have to have something for them to start with. Then they go negotiate away from what all of our work that, we get this feedback. This is what I'm hearing. So let's just say for an example that we don't approve this and we say, be mindful of the board comments and then see if you bring some curriculum or a different thing back. Still, that curriculum that they're using, that vendor has to be on our list, but the content in there is subject to negotiation by the people that are paying them for it. So all of our work is kind of a starting place. This is what I'm hearing, unless I'm wrong. So we could do all of this due diligence, and it just is to first base, and then they go negotiate away from it in their own contract process according to statute. So I'm finding this really difficult in saying, is the juice worth the squeeze for even anybody to listen to us? But we have to start someplace. So maybe we just make the attempt to have them listen and come back with something that appeals to us. But my expectation, our expectation as the State Board of Education, is this just as a starting place, and they can go right back to where we were or go off on some other tangent away from this curriculum. So that's my concern, and that's why I understand. So I appreciate this. And let me just finish up with this. When I read this, I'm going, we got to get something out there. I know this is a big issue. I know this is hard and scary stuff, and we got to get it out there because we want to protect kids. And it wasn't like perfect to meet my expectations, but I appreciate all this dialogue because now the mays and the shalls and how this, we don't have really skin in the game because they can go negotiate something completely away, but yet we, as a board, start that process to allow them to negotiate something that could be a disaster. That's kind of my concern moving forward in this whole process. So can you speak to my concern, staff? I guess I should direct this to the chair. Can I have staff speak to my concern?
Deputy Norman.
Yes,
I just want to manage expectations too, sorry.
Yes, I am not the legal eagle in the room, and we have lots of them the board has hired, so I'm going to leave part of that, because as I read it, you are correct, because my interpretation as a non-lawyer, so please come up, is that it states a school district or charter that provides the instruction described in subsection 4 shall use the instructional materials approved by the state board under subsection 2 to provide the instruction. I don't know that it says in there that it says that they can amend them, but if we can listen to Tanya really quick, the state board has approved minimum guidelines that the curriculum must have. And then what happened was this review committee that was 7 people that was combined between USBE and Department of Human Services. There were 7 members that were expert members that went through the approved process with the minimum guidelines that the state board approved, and they met those requirements. So I don't know if legally that means that then an LEA can change that or not. So that is a good question that I do not have the answer for. So I'd look to our legal team for that.
Yeah, and if I could speak to that just for a moment. Tanya Albornoz, again, Coordinator for Prevention and Student Services. Just as a reminder, as a part of this process in 2014, when the statute was passed about child sex abuse prevention instructional materials, this board approved a set of minimum guidelines that were used in the vetting of this material by the review committee, as Assistant Superintendent Norman has stated. And then in 2018, when the statute was amended to add the human trafficking prevention instructional materials portion to the statute, this board again passed guidelines, minimum guidelines, and those were the guidelines that the review committee reviewed to. So those minimum guidelines were the standard that was set by the board, and that is what we reviewed to. And I just wanted to remind you that that was a part of the process.
Yes.
And this is for staff, whoever wants to answer this question. So those minimum guidelines were approved by the concerns that Member Earls brought forth. Were those specific concerns in the guidelines that we approved in 2018?
2014
or just,
and then
was it so
18.
broad that? But I'm just having a hard time comprehending that we would approve some of that as a guideline. But
so the specific concerns brought up by Board Member Earl are not specifically addressed in those guidelines.
Okay, and so that's what's, may follow up. That's why there's some angst right now. Is it's gone a little bit past what was in 2018, and this is a word I still can't say. Maybe I'll say it if I don't think about it. The specificity, however you say it. Ever since COVID, I can't say it. I blame it on COVID.
Right.
Okay. But if I really think and go slow, I can probably get it out. That is the angst right now of what I'm hearing from my fellow board members, and it's also my own concern that specificity in some of this is kind of a big concern. The other piece is that other piece of what an LEA can do outside negotiating with this, and so I know you're speaking to, and there might be more. So,
Thank you.
Madam Chair. That concludes my concerns.
Thank you, Chair Hansen.
Thanks. I just look at this whole process, and I think it's important to recognize that 3 Strands is a company that we've worked with before. We know them. We approved their training materials 3 or 4 years ago for adults. If you look at their website, they have one mission, that's to prevent sex trafficking and human trafficking. They were formed around an incident that happened in their community. They put together a very diverse board, and this is what they do. So I think they provided us, if you look at page 9 and 10 in our materials, they provided a crosswalk that shows all of our standards and how those are met by the curriculum that they developed for us. And I guess I should point out too, these materials have been accepted by many other states. California, one of them, which might not impress us, but Texas, Ohio. There's some states that may align more closely with Utah's values that are using these materials. So this isn't leaning one side or the other on the political spectrum, as far as I could see. But anyway, there is a crosswalk that shows how they meet all those. This material was approved by a committee that included some of our staff, but also the experts in Utah on this sort of thing, people from DHS, people from DCFS, looked at it and said this was appropriate. We got a letter last night from Attorney General Sean Reyes, who says that this is age-appropriate material and he approves the curriculum, and he's been involved. That's been one of his missions, I guess, is to stamp out sex trafficking in Utah. So we have all that's gone into this, and then we have, at this stage, a need to get this out to our LEAs. We can sit and wordsmith this forever. I think there's 15 people in the room, and there might be 15 opinions about how exactly this should be presented. It's very sensitive. I can go over some of the concerns and give you my feelings on some of the concerns raised by Board Member Earl, and certainly not to discount her concerns, but we all have different opinions about what exactly what words should be used or how this should be presented. I just think it's time to get this moving forward, and I'm happy to look at a couple of these. I mean, addressing parents in the curriculum. As part of my attorney work, I do some private guardian ad litem work, where I'm involved representing kids who are in difficult divorce or other situations. And many times there's abuse involved. And my personal experience has been that parents are very often involved in that abuse. What this curriculum does, as I read it, is it says, here are the characteristics of a trusted person, and then it asks the students to apply those characteristics to different people in their lives. Parents being one set of those people or guardians. It also, as Board Member O pointed out, I think there's some people on there that it'd be very hard for them to say they were trusted adults. I think those are bad examples. And if a kid says, this person I met online is one of my trusted people, then a teacher might say, gee, why do you think that's a trusted person in your life? I mean, I think there are reasons that those bad examples are included. If we talk about a right to feel safe, I think we can have a discussion about what rights are and whether a right has to be a constitutional right or something like that. But if we change that word to deserve, does a kid deserve to feel safe? He needs to know that he deserves to feel safe, because if he thinks it's normal and it's the best he can do to feel fear when he goes home or fear in situations, then he won't aspire, he won't think that he has the ability to, or the right to deserve to feel safe, and he won't reach out to anybody to try to change that situation. So, when we get into wordsmithing, things like that, I just have a problem. Is deserve better than right? Maybe I'd use deserve if I was writing the curriculum. Does right get the message across to kids at this age? I think it does. There's others, I don't know. I can go through as far as consent language. I think that as I read the curriculum, what I saw is that it says you can decide who, as a child, to let into your circle of safety, and you can decide whether, if that situation, even though you said yes to begin with, if that isn't working for you, if you feel unsafe, you can say no. If you invite someone over to play games with you, just because you said yes to come over to play games, if that situation is bad, you have the right to say no. You can do that. You can assertively say that. I thought that it was very age appropriate as I looked at it with my experience dealing with my children and with children that I work with in my legal work. As far as the secrecy in the class, I read that to say just what was read, I think, by Board Member Hart, that things that are shared by other students shouldn't turn into gossip amongst the school and be spread that way. But you have to remember this environment. This isn't they talk about bad secrets or unsafe secrets. And those, between an adult who's maybe trying to perpetrate something in them and is told to keep safe. This environment is a classroom setting, multiple kids and parents should be sitting there, just like with the maturation training. They have the ability to be there. I don't think a teacher saying we shouldn't share this stuff that's being shared by other students in that setting is talking about any kind of, giving the kids mixed signals about secrets at all. So I'm very much in favor of getting this out there so that we can have some training to help prevent what is a really difficult problem. And we need to get this material out in the field. I think it's on us as a board not to stall and keep this spinning around in revision cycles, but to get it out to the people who need it.
Member Earl. Member Klein.
Okay. I'm trying to remember where we stood on the motion, but I'd maybe like to amend the motion to say after the 30 days, or if we need to do it sooner, that we bring back those 7 minimum guidelines and revisit those if we need to, in order to make sure that we pick a vendor or a curriculum that aligns with what we want in there, instead of using these guidelines or these minimum guidelines that were created clear back in 2014.
2018? Or was it 14?
14 and then 18.
I don't know that that's necessarily an amendment. We have an amendment on the table. I think that would be a new motion. Are you asking
Can I
to
amend
restart
the
the whole
amendment?
process? Like start new guidelines, start new processes, request curriculum again?
Yeah, if that's what we need to do, I think it's important that we all are on the same page with the minimum guidelines that this is all being based on. I don't even know what they say. Does anybody have a copy of them as they currently stand that we can look at?
They are in the backup.
They're in the backup. Would that be an amendment to the amendment?
So maybe mine should follow that. I'll make my motion after we vote on the current one.
Okay. Go ahead.
I'll go ahead with mine. The contents of, there's a lot of great stuff in this curriculum. The fact that they rely on children to trust their inner feelings is one of the greatest strengths I've seen in some of these programs. Their examples are very strong. I just think that there's a few things that need to be added to help. I do think that some of the way the wording, if it rolls out this way, I think you're going to get a lot of parent pushback. That's my concern. I want a successful program. I don't want something that's going to be undermined, because it is advocating for rights and looks like it aligns with certain other things, even if it doesn't. This isn't a design to undermine or to delay or to put off. I think we do have the responsibility to put out the very best thing, even if others are going to alter it. I can't vote for something that I can't say, and I'm not saying it needs to be perfect, but I do think there's just enough to this that could be improved upon, that could make it better. I appreciate the work that's been done with this organization, and I think that they've done incredible things. We have put their stuff forward, and there's nothing wrong with continuing to make something, especially for our kids, that's better. So I just would encourage you to vote for this, and let's move on to the next thing if we need to, or anyways.
Thanks. Member Klein, I've been talking with our parliamentary expert here. I think your motion would be a substitute motion, because what it would do would be to take away all of this and start from the beginning to completely start to draft redo the 7 guidelines. Is that your substitute motion? Is that what you want to do?
That is what I would want to do, but I can make that after we vote on the original motion, if need be. But I'm okay.
Well, there
just
wouldn't be
see-
a need.
If something passes,
If something passes, then it would be over. There wouldn't be a need.
All right, we'll do a substitute motion then.
Okay.
To start over on
Okay.
the minimum standards.
Okay, do we have a second? Okay, we do not have a second. So we'll go back to speaking on this particular motion. Member Moss?
Point of clarification, is the pending motion then to reject it? And was that an amendment to an underlying motion to send it back?
No.
Or was that
There's a
motion
motion
never
on the
made?
floor to accept it. There's an amendment on the floor to reject it and to ask the Three Strands Company to consider these suggestions and bring a response back in a month to the board.
I'm in favor,
Hey,
by the
AG
way.
Quisenberry?
Vice Chair, I believe Chair Huntsman asked, or his concern was along the lines about being out of compliance if the board does not vote to pass these materials today. And maybe another board member also mentioned some concern along the compliance. And it's my understanding that as of today, we're not only currently out of compliance, but we've been out of compliance for a long time, for a couple of years. So to the extent you do postpone this or push this down the road another month or two, it's just kind of expanding that compliance that much longer. Chair Huntsman, I think, was that, if I can, did that answer Chair Huntsman's question about compliance?
the other question is, once this becomes the curriculum, can an LEA modify away from this minimum standard in their contracting space to change the curriculum? That's a question.
Sure. So in other words, if this board approves it and then Granite goes and changes it, I believe according to the proposed draft rule that you're going to look at here tomorrow, or is it later on today, then the minute they change, say a Granite School District changes the content, then it puts the content out of approval of this board according to that rule. If that's the way you want the rule to go, then yeah, changes would essentially violate your rule.
Can I ask a question to the maker of the motion? The one to
Sorry.
reject this, and would it be your understanding that if we voted yes to your amendment, that we are asking Three Strands to make the changes that you suggested?
I think we're asking for them to review that and consider them. So yes.
But not make, but consider them in the feasibility or not feasibility. And the reason
I
I ask
can't
this,
vote for it the way it is. I guess the idea is for them to consider that so we can review it.
and then they would come back and say, out of these suggestions, we find that these fit in line with all of our expert understanding that could still protect children, and these actually would not. And
Yeah.
so we can make these changes, but we don't feel like we can make these changes and put our name behind it.
Absolutely. And I think there may be maybe they've got a valid reason why, right? And that there's no reason why they couldn't put something forward that way.
Okay.
Right?
Because I agree with some of the suggestions and disagree with other suggestions. So I feel like if I vote to do this, I don't want it to send the message that we're asking them to make these changes. We're asking them to seriously evaluate the requested changes. for example, I really like how you juxtaposed like the prevention, dimension, refusal language against the consent language that's in there. I like that. I don't like the idea that children don't have rights. Children are protected under the 14th Amendment. Children have the right to be safe, as evidenced by our laws that change.
Fetus has rights.
Change if they're not safe. Children have the right to nutrition, as evidenced by what happens when they are neglected. It's not about the feelings. It's not about children feeling safe. Children have a right to be safe. They have a right to be safe. And so if by voting for this undermines any opportunity for them to be safe, then I am out. But if this could be considered and expertly reviewed and vetted to where, yes, we can do these things, and it would still protect children to be safer than they are now and give them a fighting chance of getting out of this stuff that they're dealing with, then I couldn't support them going back and reviewing. So, Member Hart?
I just want to make sure I understand something. When, say this was approved, it's on the list, a district decides to implement it with whatever changes or guidelines they have, which is their prerogative, so I'm not sure, that's not really, they still, teachers would still be under commitment to Utah law in terms of what they can say, what they can't say, the language they use, regardless of the curriculum. The curriculum does not supersede. Now, any curriculum is going to have, and maybe it's a little laissez-faire, maybe it's not appropriate, but I've looked at a lot of curriculum and not a single piece of curriculum is perfect. But we still have Utah guidelines for Utah teachers, and that supersedes whatever is in this curriculum, correct? And I agree. I don't want the standard to be so high that that list stays empty forever. And I'm afraid that's the direction we're heading.
Thank you, Mr. Director Van Holten.
Thank you, Jeff Van Holten, Policy Advisor for the Board. I just wanted to clarify what it is you're voting on and what authority you have statutorily with this. You as a board have the ability to approve or deny wholesale. You do not have the authority to amend or wordsmith the curriculum within itself. So with that in mind, board members' motion is accurate and in order, but the motion would be to reject because you need the following things changed, and you would not approve them until they have changed. So it's not a list of recommendations or suggestions, because your only authority is to up or down this. So if you deny, you are required to give them your reasons, and they would have to come back for approval, which of course you could reverse yourself and say, you haven't changed anything, but we've changed our mind and we can approve you. But just to be clear, that is the authority you have, and that's kind of where it ends. It's up or down wholesale.
Well,
Point of order?
yes.
That would be true unless we approve the rule, and then that would change that. Is that accurate?
That is not.
What is the 30 days in the rule then? What is that?
So that is to provide them 30 days to come back to get approval again. But again, it's an up or down. So it's not in violation of the law. Because again, you can say, we reject this because you need to amend the following 10 things. And if they come back with only 8, it is up to you as a board whether those 2 things they didn't change means they're still denied, or if they're approved because those 2 things are no longer important to the board. So again, it's still just a wholesale up or down on what, and then you can provide them. You are not required to provide them a list of recommendations. You can say, we're going to deny you because we do not think this is appropriate at all. Come back another time with a completely revised curriculum. So that's just something you need to all be aware of. It's an up or down vote.
Chair,
And you
okay.
can, the rule does say 30 days to provide a reasoning or give them a chance to come back and persuade you otherwise. But that doesn't bind you as the board to have to provide them with an entire list of amendments they have to make, unless you want that added to the rule.
Well, the language of the motion was for them to consider, not to make the changes. So can they bring their response back after consideration?
They could, but I also need to remind the board the rule is not in effect. It is not the current law. So right now, the only thing in law you can do is up or down it, and you can add recommendations if you so choose as a board. But right now, the only authority in place is to up or down this. And if you want to add to that, you can, but that's all you have.
So if we want to add for them to consider these ideas and bring a response back, can we do that?
You can request it, yes.
Chair Hansen? Can you speak into your mic, please?
Sorry, I had it up so because it's been left on. One point on the school districts modifying what we approve. I don't think that they can do that under the code. If we look at 53G 9207, it says the school district or charter school shall use the instructional materials approved by the state board. So as soon as they modify it, they're out of compliance. That's the way I read it, and I defer to Brian, of course. But the whole reason for us to approve it is so that they can't modify it, because the legislature gave us certain elements that needed to be met, and they want to make sure that we put that into rule, and then that gets all the way, as the chair would say, to the end of the row. It doesn't leave room for that to happen, I don't believe. I'm also just really, I'll speak again, just against us wordsmithing, and some of it's wordsmithing, some of it are more substantial changes, but doing that at this stage of the game. If we want to give clear direction in the beginning to develop curriculum, I think that we should do that in our process, and we can relook at this, but we need to get something out there, and this is wholly acceptable for me. I think, again, the substance of this taken as a whole needs to get out there in the field and be a benefit to the people who are most at risk. So, thanks.
Member Lear.
And I know that people are looking for compromises, but if these would be suggestions for 3 strands to consider, I have 25 more. And I'd like to add those 25 to the list, so there are 39 considerations for 3 strands to look at and consider. I'm just not willing to say these are our only 10 considerations. So
Are you making an amendment to the amendment?
So I can't, that I have 39 more?
Well, you have to tell us what they are, and those would be an amendment to the amendment.
But my point is, because I was told we could not wordsmith, we could not make those kinds of changes. I didn't take everybody's valuable time to come up with those. But I also didn't expect to have to say, I would approve these 10, but no others. I think everybody would have some suggestions for wording changes. So I can't, as much as I'd like to compromise on this, I can't just say, let's consider only these 10 changes. Now, by tomorrow, I could have 10 more, 20 more. And if we could just do that in the abstract, I'd be great with that.
Member Moss.
Procedurally, if they brought us back something that we approved, they took the 10 considerations, gave it some thought, whatever, talked to Uncle Tony, spun a bottle. I mean, they can do anything between now and 30 days. Presumably, they would look at this and say, hey, okay, the state board has some concerns. Let's do some things and then go back and see if we can get accepted, right? If we did that, districts currently using the other version could go to that version, could they not? I mean, they would say, okay, we have a decision from the state board that this is the approved version, therefore that's what we shall use, and they could then go purchase that from the vendor, correct?
I follow.
Am I off on that?
You are not, although there's potential unintended consequences or risk, because if you approve without amendment or without suggested recommendations, or you have suggested recommendations, you've approved them. That's the only authority you have. It is up to 3 strands whether or not they listen to you, because they're now approved. So they wouldn't have to come back.
Right, but if they did, I guess my point is, if they came back with, having considered our concerns, came back with a slightly revised set, and we said, that's great, thank you very much, and we approve, then the districts that are currently using the other version could adopt our new approved version, which wasn't wordsmithed by us, it was wordsmithed by the provider at our request. We can't wordsmith it, I think that's been clear, but that they can tweak, give us to us, we can say, yes, that's great. Districts can then take that and approve it, and in fact must use that, right? Okay.
So are you amending the amendment to approve the curriculum with the suggestion to come back in 30 days?
No, my understanding of the process that was originally proposed would be that we would reject it with recommendations. They would go take that, consider it, use whatever consideration they choose, hopefully come back in 30 days and say, hey, we made some tweaks. Now do you approve? And then at that point, we would have another decision whether to approve what they had revised. That's what I understood the intent, or reject it, correct. We would have then another up or down vote on the revisions that they took from our suggestions, whichever, if they took 2 of them or 3 of them or added their own, we could then have that come back to us, and I think that's the intent, right?
And then they bring it back and I'll add 10 more. And I'll
Well,
add 20.
Well, then you'd have to
we
send it back for
could.
another 30 days.
But one would
And
hope.
we'd have to vote on that.
That could be endless. What we would hope that they would take our considerations and do something in 30 days, and then we'd have a decision to make. That's how I understand the motion.
Member Straight.
Yes, I see some landmines here. Some of them have already been expressed, but one of the concerns is we have 9. We have 9 right now. 10, excuse me. So are we going to vote on each one of those 10? Because we've already heard from many board members that, well, I'm for this one, but I'm not for that one. And let's say we do divide the question and we vote on all 9, and the vote is 8-7 on each one of those individually, goes out, it comes back, and I don't like that they've changed this one or that one. Now we're doing an up or down vote on the whole thing. I think, here's my thoughts on this. Let's vote it either up or down, the whole thing. And if it gets voted down, then 3 stands at their wish. They can change it how they want, but it's going to be based on the record. Because we cannot, I do not see a way in which we can send 10 items back to them, and let's say they do 4, and I don't like 2 of them, well, now it's an up and down vote anyway. We are painting ourselves into a corner unless we just go straight up or down. Now, my vote is I'm going to vote for it, and then we'll go from there. But that's the only way I see that we can move forward. I don't think we can move forward with 10 suggestions. I don't think it works practically. That's my position.
Chair Huntsman.
If I'm the last one in the queue, I was going to call to question, but if nobody else is in the queue.
Jenny has her light on still.
Okay, I'm going to call to question.
Okay.
I'm fine with taking the provisions off just as a notice, but I do want to draw attention to the fact that all board members have had access to this since the 1st of June. All board members could have listened to the board meeting our special meeting the end of June, which I addressed these issues then. And all board members did have access going into this board meeting. So I did take the time to go through those. I tried to be thoughtful. I'm not trying to, we don't have to actually push those recommendations on. I think 3 strands can be aware of that. I think you've got a good point, Board Member Straight. I think that there's wisdom in that, an up or down vote, and then they can listen to, the direction there. But I just want to be clear that for those of you who want 10 to 30, 40, whatever, you've had access to it. There hasn't been a deterrent of you being able to access. The public can't access it, parents can't access it, but you've had access to it. So these were my thoughtful look at it. I tried not to be critical, but I tried to look at it from public's eyes and from the things that they would be looking at. These are the things that will draw the most attention and actually harm, I think, the usage of this in schools. I think you're going to have parents go in and ask for the review of this curriculum, and these are some things that they're going to have concerns with. I want the success of this program. I want children to be protected. And so I think we do need just an up or down vote. I think there's wisdom in that at this point, and I hope you will look at the in-depth at the curriculum so that we can have the best things out there. And I think it is our responsibility to do that, not just move it forward and push something forward that isn't the best thing. And that is part of compliance, is putting the best thing out there.
So I sort of made a mistake, but took a chair prerogative because he called the question, but I allowed you to speak. So I would like to clarify. You are saying you're fine taking the provisions off, so you want to change your motion to just rejecting the curriculum without asking them to consider these ideas and bring it back in 30 days?
I think we're going to need to, it sounds like. Both, I don't think we can require it of them.
Well, we can't require it, but we can request them to consider and bring back their expert opinion. In my opinion,
leave it on or take it off? Okay,
in my opinion,
leave it on. I'll leave it on.
You're not asking them to make these changes. That's what has to be clear. You're asking them to consider the validity of the requests.
Specific changes, which we're not all comfortable with because we haven't voted on them.
But then you'd have to vote no.
Or we can divide the question and say, I want to vote on every single one of
You
these.
are you dividing? Are you moving to divide the question?
I can in good conscience say, I am asking Three Strands to reconsider.
And that's not the motion. I'm not either. I can't vote for that either. So the motion is asking them to vet these suggestions for validity and safety and accuracy and.
But that suggests that we like them, that we are in favor of them, or we wouldn't be asking them to consider them.
Not for me, but that's not how I see it. Because I agree with some and disagree with others, but I don't want to divide the question out to all of them. But I want a clear message sent to the company that we're not saying make these changes or we won't approve this curriculum. We're saying we have these suggestions we'd like you to consider and bring back your opinion.
And I mean, seriously, and other board members have other questions, so please consider all these questions from all board members. Because now the rules have changed and we can provide suggestions.
Well, that's fine if you want to amend the amendment to increase. Are there some that you would like to add to this request?
I would like to be able to send, I don't think this letter's going to be sent today. I would like, before the letter's sent to Three Strands, say it will be sent for any board member who wants to add suggestions.
So is your amendment that they would consider these 10 and any that are in within 1 week from board members from today?
Yes.
Okay.
Is what
There's an amendment on the floor to add a 1 week opportunity. Board member, there's an amendment on the floor to add a 1 week opportunity for board members to contribute additional suggestions to be considered for an opinion from Three Strands to be brought back if they are going to include or not include this in their curriculum. If we do include suggestions. Do we have a second? Member Moss has a second. Deputy Norman. And then I'll go back to the motion maker. You willing to withdraw, or do you want to keep?
I'm calling the previous question, but it's only on the table when the chair says it's on the table, not when I.
Thank you.
I'm sharing right now.
Deputy Norman.
I'm still trying to do that.
I'm trying to think of the process if I were in Three Strands' shoes. unbiased here in any way. If board members are contributing comment, which is another commenting period, then if there are disagreeing or disagreements within the comments being submitted, how would we expect for Three Strands or any vendor to be able to address the comments within? So if we're asking for something from the vendor, I think it would be fair to the vendor to be able to say what the board as a whole would like to have or see, so that they're not trying to please two different sides or three different sides, and know what it is that is very clear. So I think clarity is would be fair.
Oh, I think therein lies the question. We're not asking them to please the board. We're asking for their expert opinion to be brought back on these 10 issues. Chair, so we have an amendment on the floor that has been seconded, that if we accept an opportunity for them to review and consider suggestions that have been brought to the table, that board members have 1 week from today to submit additional suggestions for them to consider and bring back if they are feasible or not, within keeping everything they're doing valid and all of that. And we have a second. So those who, do you need to speak to this amendment? Yes. Chair Hansen, please.
Yes, please. First, I think the question was called, and I think the amendment's improper, because I think that we can't proceed to that without considering the call of the question before this. Secondly, if I need to speak to the amendment, if that's not a valid, I guess, objection to what's happening, this is, I don't know, it puts our vendor in a position that's just untenable, and it won't result in anything that comes back that's any more palatable than what's here. They've already presented their best work to us. They knew the purpose. They knew our basic standards. They knew Utah law. They presented their best work to us, and now we're asking them to go back and redo it based on the opinions, the separate opinions of 15 of us. There's no way that they can satisfy that, and there's no way that we'll vote yes on that when it comes back if we won't vote yes on what's in front of us now.
Okay.
Because
thank you. I'm going to entertain the amendment, and then I'm going to allow the call to question to be brought to the table. So there's an amendment proposed on the floor to allow board members to contribute ideas for consideration for 1 week from today if we accept and approve the amendment on the table, which is to reject. So those in favor say aye. Aye. You're voting on Carol's amendment to the amendment, that if we allow these suggestions, that other board members can have 1 week to provide suggestions to be also considered by the company.
As a point of order, you can't make a if. Can you make a conditional like that? Wouldn't we just?
You can make it conditional. You can make it conditional.
I might need a.
So if board member Earl's amendment passes, then this amendment to the amendment would be in effect.
Discussion to
and
the
member
motion.
AAG Quisenberry.
I have to complicate this one more step further, and that is, I know, don't do it. Any revised draft from Three Strands that this board then would approve, you'd still need to run it past our partner, Department of Human Services, to have them also approved, since we're kind of co-joined with them. They've
Legally.
approved the current draft, and now they're waiting on us to up or down it.
So you're
just keep that
saying
in
we'd
mind.
be a minimum of 2 months out?
Well, just we would need to run the revised version back to them for their review.
So Three Strands would come back. If we approve their curriculum, then it would go back to
Ultimately, yeah.
the department
Sure. Whether that takes a
to
month.
approve or not.
Or 2 weeks.
And maybe
or
it takes
however.
2 days, maybe it takes a month. We don't know.
That's right.
Okay. Let's vote. Member
Discussion
Cannon?
to the motion.
Okay.
So we have all of these amendments from Board Member Earl, and Board Member Lear makes a point that she would like to bring other amendments forward, or others could bring amendments forward.
These are
And I don't-
suggestions, not amendments.
Okay,
Suggestions.
suggestions. Well, I don't want to send any of those to Three Strands Global Foundation until they have a full vote of the board.
Then vote no.
Well, yeah, I think all of this is just extraneous. We need an upvote or a downvote.
Okay,
Because
but
it's a
right
full
now you
vote
have
of
to
the
speak
board.
to the amendment to the amendment. If her motion passes, do you want board members to be allowed to contribute additional
I
suggestions?
really think both are out of order.
Okay, but are you speaking to the amendment for or against the amendment? For
I'm
or
speaking
against the
against
amendment?
everything.
Okay, well, right now, we're on the amendment. So she's speaking against the amendment. All right, board members, we have an amendment to the amendment on the table. If board member Earl's motion passes, we will allow board members to contribute additional suggestions for 1 week from today. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? No. Okay, will the ayes please raise your hands? Four yeses. Lear, Hanson, Moss, Davis. Everyone else is a no. That motion fails. And member Straight was a yes as well.
Let's keep this alive. Let's move
Okay,
to the
let's keep
previous
it alive.
question.
Okay, now we have a motion on the table to move the question, but we have no other lights, so we're going to go ahead and do that anyway. So we have a motion on the board to reject the current Three Strands curriculum with a request for them to consider suggestions that have been made by Board Member Earl and bring their opinion back on the feasibility of if they feel like they can or they can't incorporate the suggestions to our September board meeting. That was really wordy. We have a motion on the table to reject the Three Strands curriculum and request that they consider Member Earl's suggestions and bring their opinion back in 30 days. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? No. The ayes, will you please raise your hands? That motion fails. Member Belknap, were you a yes or a no? She's out.
No.
She's a no.
No, I'm here.
And you're a no? And I was a yes. So do we need to do that again? Do you want a roll call vote? Sybil? Okay. No, we're going to do a roll call vote. We're going to do a roll call vote. Vice Chair Belknap?
No.
Member Booth? We're taking a roll call vote on Member Earl's motion because there's a discrepancy in the numbers over here. Member Cannon? No. Member Klein? Yes. Member Earl? Yes. Member Hanson? No. Member Hart? No. Chair Huntsman?
No.
Member Hutchings? Yes. Member Hymas? Yes. Member Lear? No. Member Moss? Yes. Member Norton? No. Member Straight? No. That fails, but I was a yes also. I'm going to turn the time over to Chair Huntsman.
Wait, there's one more.
You get, all you did.
There's a motion out of, you got a motion out of committee.
Yeah.
That is the most depressing thing you've said to me.
That was,
this
and
entire
that was
day.
an amendment. That wasn't the actual motion.
Oh, for heaven's sakes.
Am I
Okay.
wrapping this up?
Nope. No. I'll do it.
wrapping it up?
I'm wrapping it up.
You're hang in there.
Okay.
Hang in there, kid. You got it.
All right. Here we go. There's a motion on the table that the board approve 3 Strands Global Foundation Protect Utah Student Instructional Materials for final approval, and I'm going to take a roll call.
Cindy, I
vote.
have a motion, I have an amendment. I know,
Okay.
I'm sorry. I owe you something.
Go ahead.
My amendment is that the board rejects the 3 strands. I guess we just vote no. Never mind.
Yep. Okay. Again, there's a motion on the floor that the board approve 3 Strands Global Foundation Protect Utah Student Instructional Materials for final approval, and I am going to take a roll call vote. Vice Chair Belknap,
No.
Member Booth, Member Cannon. Yes. To approve. Member Klein. Member Earl. Member Hanson? Yes. Member Hart? Yes. Chair Huntsman?
Yes.
Member Hutchings? No. Member Hymas?
No.
Member Lear?
Yes.
Member Moss?
No.
Member Norton? Yes. Member Straight?
Yes.
And I will move over to a yes on that, but that passed prior. So it passes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 yeses, 7 noes. Now can I turn the time over to you? Or do we have another one?
One more. Or do you want me to take it?
No, I can do it.
Huh?
I'll do it. So Chair Hanson, we're on 277-630. Mm-hmm.
I leave it on, then I turn it off. So, again, R277, the committee recommends the board approves R277-630, Child Sex Abuse and Human Trafficking Prevention Training and Instruction Draft 2 on second and final reading.
There's a motion on the floor that the board approve R277-630, Child Sex Abuse and Human Trafficking Prevention Training and Instruction Draft 2 on second and final reading. Discussion, Board Member Earl.
I have amendments.
Okay.
So let me make sure I've got these.
Are
Yeah,
those
just-
pre-written somewhere?
Yeah, they are pre-written
Okay.
somewhere. So on line 60, strike and. On line 61, add the word and. Line 62, add concepts surrounding refusal skills consistent with section 53G 10-402. On 63, this is going to be a slight change because I was fortunate to sit by Carol Lear today. So, and I mean that in all loving, I might do it more often. I don't know if she. That might be a promise. Leave disclosure in, but add a comma and reporting. So leaving disclosure and reporting in there. She had a compelling argument, and I appreciate it. On 71, add appropriate mechanism, including time and place for disclosure and reporting. I'll need to add disclosure in there.
Jeff, you want to add, she wants to take out the purple strike out and just.
Yeah, sorry. Wait for that. So, yeah, leave disclosure in there. Thanks, Jeff. That's why I bought you cinnamon bears today. Thank you. Yeah. So we would need to strike, I guess, that, yeah, that would be right. So on 79, add a board member, 71, did I get that right?
71.
I already do 71? Oh, yeah, I did, oh, sorry. So down on, yes. Okay, so appropriate mechanism, did we do that? Including time and place for disclosure and reporting? So we'd need to add disclosure after 4. See where I'm talking? Yeah, disclosure and reporting. And then on line 79, a board member may request additional review of the curriculum content by submitting the name of the person conducting the review and a signed non-disclosure agreement. And then the last part of this is our AG does have a non-disclosure agreement that would work in this situation that they've been able to vet. And that could be added if we needed to the motion, I'm not sure. But there is one available. I guess maybe just letting board members know that would be appropriate for this curriculum.
Thank you. There's a motion on the floor as stated. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Member Klein, second. Chair Hansen, discussion?
Sorry, can you come back to me, please?
You're the only one on the,
I'm the only
unless
one
the
up.
maker of the motion would like to speak.
I just
Member
have
Earl?
one question. The blue was already from last month. Is that accurate?
from our
Okay,
committee
that's what I
meeting.
thought, but
I would, and again, these were just sent over today, so really haven't had a chance to look at these after our committee discussion. But I'd ask if staff could comment on the addition, if I can get to the right spot, on any issues with the review by outside parties, even with the non-disclosure agreement, and the addition of, on line 71, to the list of items that were already there, which I believe were from code. If we could just hear from staff on those items.
And I have a point of order probably, or clarification consistent with that. Can I add that?
Let's take the point of clarification and then we'll go back to the question.
Okay. I'm not sure on the one about, I don't know what it means when it says a board member has the right. I don't know if it's a local board member, a state board member. It was a small b board member. And I don't know, does it mean in districts? Because we don't choose curriculum. We approve curriculum, I guess. So it's an unclear statement that I'm asking for further clarification.
Also, with that point of clarification, I had just a little bit of clarification. Does the decision still lie with the vendor if they want to accept an additional person or not to review? We're talking about the bottom.
If we
You
could have
scroll
staff,
down
if
to
we
the
could have
bottom.
staff first respond to the request, and then I think I can have follow-up, which would include what you just talked about.
Okay, so let's go ahead and have the questions answered by Member Chair Hansen, and then we'll hopefully segue into the questions by Member Lear and myself.
Tanya Albornoz, Coordinator for Prevention and Student Services. So it is our intention that any curriculum that's submitted will be subject to R277469, the Instructional Materials Commission Operating Procedures. So we'll be going through that review process prior to coming to the board for approval, just as any other instructional materials do. This would essentially be adding an extra step, if that's what the board desires to do, that I don't think any other instructional materials that you currently approve has to also go through. So that's my comment. I don't know if Brian maybe wants to add anything to that.
So if I understand the question is, right, so the non-disclosure agreement, I obtained a form, it's about 3 pages, single space, it's very thorough, very comprehensive. We've used it in my division already. And I made a couple little changes, and I did share that with Member Earl, and I believe she likes that as well. And so to the extent that is signed, that's a binding legal document that gets used really frequently. And so the question is whether that's appropriate or not. I think that is definitely appropriate, and to the extent it would help, then I would recommend that.
The question was, if this passes for this, will it be just specific to this content area, or will this then become acceptable for all the instructional materials? So any board member could be having anyone look at any of the curriculum.
Well,
And if I could follow up on that, the way it's written, I believe, says that as long as there's an NDA in place, that material could be sent out. It doesn't say that the vendor can refuse to that. So even if the vendor's competitor was our reviewer, we had them sign an NDA, then the vendor that's supplying the materials doesn't look like they would have any choice from this and this.
That was my question. Does the final say lie with the vendor?
I don't think our rules combine vendors.
I don't know that we can either.
Chair, if I may.
So 2
Vice Chair.
questions. Is this just specific to trafficking curriculum?
Yes.
It seems like that's implied, but you could tighten that up by adding some language in there that says specific to.
That was part of my question, so I'd like that.
To make it clear, so there's no question. Yeah, so for example, review of the, and maybe Jeff's got some language.
reference the rule.
Or you mean the statute?
So this applies only to sex trafficking curriculum. And any member of this board, we have an outlined instructional materials procedure. Any member of this board could say, I additionally want my person to review this, and they'll sign a non-disclosure agreement. And then does that request go to the company to thumbs up or thumbs down? Or does that somehow bind the company that they have to show their material to this person, even if they are a competitor or something?
So the way this is worded, and it's in a rule, and we have to remember what authority the board has and does not have. You can up and down approval or denial of a vendor. If you say a board member may request, it does not bind the vendor to accept the request. It just permits the board member to make the request. There's nothing in this rule that says, and the vendor must adhere to it.
Okay, and they can only make the request contingent on the reviewer signing an NDA.
That is how this is worded currently in the
Okay.
rule. So
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Member,
Could I follow up,
yes,
please?
go ahead.
And I'll follow up, I think, looking at this and the different items that are here and the number of changes, I think that the only way to address this effectively is to divide it. I hesitate to do that, but if we don't just go through each one of these and vote up and down on it, I think we're going to be here talking in a circle for a long time. So I am making a motion to divide the question by
I'll second that.
revision.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor to divide the question. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? No. Noes, will you raise your hand, please? Member Earl, Hutchings, Klein, and Moss are noes. That motion passes. So we're going through every single proposed change.
Yes.
Am I okay to speak to the first one, which is line 61, 62?
Yeah, and what I'm going to ask everybody's name who's currently in the queue to take your name off and put it on if you want to speak to each specific change. Otherwise, let's quickly get through these and vote them yes or no. So we're up to the first one.
Can we get it on the screen? Could we just get it on the screen, I think?
Can we?
There, it's up there. It's there. Oh, no. So there's a copy prepared that shows these changes to the rule with line numbers.
So my question procedurally, Chair or Sybil, is that now that he's divided the question, does the maker of the original motion go through each one, or is there just a motion on the table to approve these, and we just need to vote up or down on each one pending discussion? We don't have to make a new motion again? Okay. Okay, we're on the first change.
Okay, I believe that's the one on lines 61 and 62. Relates to refusal skills in 53G 10 and 402. That section of the code applies to health instruction, which I'm not sure, I mean, I don't have anything against refusal skills, but the section there says informing a student that a student may not consent to criminally prohibited activities or activities for which the student is legally prohibited from giving consent, including the electronic transmission of sexually explicit images by an individual, of the individual or another. That's the part that relates to refusal skills. And then there's a little bit, that's the consent part. There's refusal skills above that. It's included in refusal skills. I just am not sure that that's directly applicable where that's health curriculum requirements and health instruction. So I hesitate to bring in something from a section of code that's not directly related to, I mean, I can see some relation, but it's not on point exactly with human trafficking, and try to shoehorn that into the. Sorry?
If you go up on line 30. Okay. On line 30.
Thank you. Member Hanson, are you done speaking?
Yes, I'm done speaking to that.
Okay. Seeing no other lights, did you have, Member Earl, anything? We need to vote on adding concepts surrounding refusal skills consistent with section 53G 10-402. And again, at the bottom, and concepts surrounding refusal skills consistent with section 53G 10-402. Those in, Member Straight?
So I just really want to have the answer to the question, because after Chair Hansen gave his reference and his concern, there was a question back in reference to line
30.
Yeah,
it's in there.
And I would like to know the relevance of that, if you could direct that, Vice Chair.
Okay, so there's a question about line 30, and I'm assuming that question is the relevance to the maker of the motion?
Back to staff.
Or staff,
Well,
whichever
we
is
have,
appropriate.
yeah, I mean, we are building it into this rule, and so it's a clarification to make sure that that particular piece is articulated. But we, on line 30, we reference 53G 10-402. This has to do with health education and such. So to say that it's, it's irrelevant, it isn't. So I don't know.
Director Van Holten?
I'm not exactly sure I quite understand what the question is, but I will begin talking and you tell me if I'm in the right direction or not. So in lines 28 through 30, so this is, just to orient everyone, this is the stuff that's the scoring criteria for a vendor. So you have A, B, C, and D that they will be scored on. So A says you need to show us a table that you're in line with Utah code. And it's not up on that particular screen, so I apologize if you're looking to that screen for guidance, because I am not. I'm looking at the rule itself. So they would show, the vendor would show how they align with the child sex abuse and human trafficking code, as well as how their curriculum aligns with the health education code.
Thank you. Member Hanson, or Chair Hanson?
Yeah, this might need to go back to committee, because that's, we reference 402, but 402 also provides about parent consent for the training, and the rules are different under 402 compared to the human sex trafficking code that's specific to this training. So
Are you making a substitute motion to send this back to
I'll make a motion that we send
committee?
this back to committee. to look at this. Would there be any negative repercussions
Second.
from staff if we were to do that?
Okay, there's a substitute motion on the floor, the second by Member Straight, to send all of the changes in this rule back to committee for additional vetting. Those who want to speak to this, I assume your name is still on here.
I'll second that.
We already have a second. Member Moss.
Just briefly, 402 1B defines refusal skills. I would assume the intent was to incorporate that definition of refusal skills into this rule, right? 1B sub or little 1 through 5, a student's ability to clearly expressly refuse sexual advances, find a minor and adult, obligation to stop if refused by another individual. Is that the intent? It looks to me relevant. I wonder if we just need to narrow.
If I can respond.
If I could, hold on.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
If I could just say, I guess one suggestion is, do we just need to narrow that to the part that defines refusal skills and incorporate that rather than the broader section about student health that's not on topic?
Are you speaking
maybe.
for or against the substitute motion?
Yeah, against sending it back, because it looks like there is a specific definition of refusal skills, which I would understood to be the intent of referencing that section, and perhaps it just needs to be narrowed.
Okay. I'll go back to Chair Hansen and then I'll go to Member Hart.
Okay, and I think Member Moss may be right, but I'm not sure if there's other things that that staff had intended to incorporate or reference in that. 402 is quite long. There's a lot in it. And it does contradict another piece of code that does directly apply to this. And so I think that this would be better done in committee than try to do an edit here and find problems later. I don't think this is time sensitive.
Member Hart?
Can the maker of the motion please clarify what they mean by there's contradictions? Just so I understand the scope. Or else pull it up on my computer so I can read it.
The sex ed has its own, the sex ed code has a section in it about parents' approval and attendance and that sort of thing. The human trafficking code has its own section about what should be done with the parents to have them participate in it. And those don't line up exactly, I don't believe, and probably we need to consider that before we adopt it or reference it, because they
Thank you. Director Van Holten?
I can actually clarify right now if it helps. And part of that is because 53G 10403 actually exempts the child abuse and human trafficking section of code from being part of the definition of sexual education. So because of that fact, the only thing we can take from 402 is the definition of refusal skills, because this is not considered sex ed, so the sex ed laws don't apply here. But we can adopt the definition of refusal skills. So that was a typo. It should say 150, the 402 1, whatever the reference is to refusal skills. So that's the only thing you really could take in.
I would still prefer to do a better job at this than we have to get it to the
Okay.
board, but it's fine. If we want to proceed, we can go ahead and edit
Okay,
that.
we have a substitute motion to have the committee do some additional vetting. Please speak for or against the substitute motion. Member Klein?
I'm sorry, I just have a point of order or clarity. I just, this rule is specific to the sex trafficking. Does the 3 strands meet up with everything that's in here as is?
Director
Sure
Van
about that?
Holten?
I see yes and no's.
I nod my head yes, and the reason is I used the application in the scoring rubric to write the rule. Yes, without the proposed amendments.
Were the no, I don't know at this point. Deputy Norman,
I just wanted to clarify why I shook my head no. The process is what is clarified within the rule that is the easy to explain. So that's how there's the difference. So when I shook my head no, I was referring to the process that is now detailed within the rule and how it varies from 469 or any other process that we've done. So that's why you looked and one interpreted it, the question one way and one the other. So we didn't disagree. We just had a different answer.
Can I
Different
clarify?
questions.
Follow up,
Yes.
Member Klein?
Yes, so I think you said that anything that we approved, the curriculum review committee also has to approve. Did they already approve the 3 strands? Or did we skip a step according to this rule
Deputy
if it
Norman?
So
passes?
so that's where there might be some confusion. So this rule clarifies the role of of a committee specific to child sex abuse and human trafficking, but it aligns the efforts that we currently have in our 277-469, which is our instructional materials review committee. So it's aligning those efforts, but then there are more specificity for human trafficking and child sex abuse. So it takes all of this and then adds some pieces to it, and that's how it's different.
There's a motion. Don't leave. We're voting on your motion. He has to leave. Those in favor of sending this back to committee for additional vetting, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? That passes unanimously.
Hey, before we dismiss, can I just make
We're not dismissing yet, but
Okay.
go ahead.
I just have something I need to clarify from some earlier votes. I just wanted to clarify my vote was a no on 5.3, all contracts. I know we split it into 2 groups, and then we only voted on one group, and I thought we were going to come back and vote on the other, but I'm a no on all the contracts. I'm a no on all the statutory change requests on 11.1.
You can't. Whatever you voted during the meeting stands on the record.
But you can.
However, you can
make this
say it
declaration.
publicly, but she won't change it.
And I'm on 12.3, I would vote no.
Thank you.
R277629.
Trust me, because I've tried. And Lorraine gave me the smackdown. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Let's